Glass slammed. Papers scattered across the boardroom table as Ella pushed the door closed, and Donovan Reed's laugh ricocheted through the glass. She hadn't meant to make a scene. She only wanted the meeting finished. "You always bring heat, Ella," he said, voice soft where the room was loud. His hand brushed the papers near hers. It was almost nothing and everything at once. She felt the shift in air like a warning bell. Ella had dreamed of this job. She had rehearsed answers, worked overtime, saved to buy the interview suit. Now her palms sweated in a building that glittered from the outside and trembled on the inside. Donovan was a spectacle on stages and in interviews, a man who signed charities and smiled for cameras. Inside, he was a different currency, words, favors, invisible terms that bought obedience. He began inviting her to late meetings, praising her in ways that singled her out. "We need to protect your talent," he'd say, and the words tightened like a noose disguised as compliment. Lena in HR saw the change first. "Keep your head down," she warned in an elevator, eyes skimming the crowded mirrors. "He flatters everyone, but he expects loyalty." Lena's voice was careful. "You're bright, Ella. Don't let him make you doubt yourself." That evening, Donovan called with a quick chat, and the line grew heavy with his slow compliments. He asked about her life, cataloged her dreams, and suggested she work late on a private project. The suggestion felt like a test, and when she hesitated, his tone shifted in degrees she had never learned to read. The first isolation started small, an invitation to a one-on-one meeting, an email copied to no one, a suggestion to miss the team's Friday lunch to finish strategy. Colleagues smiled in halls, but their eyes slid away when Donovan passed. Rumors began to curl through the office like smoke. Quiet statements about women leaving, about jobs lost with polite explanations. Ella found herself reading murmured notes and feeling a pressure that had nothing to do with deadlines. Power had many voices. Most chose silence. One night, returning to her desk after a late brainstorm, Ella overheard two former employees in a stairwell. "She resigned," one said. No one dug deeper. The other answered with a flat sound. "Quiet departures save reputations." The word resignation landed like sediment. People slipped out and the company polished the gaps. Ella's stomach sank. She had always believed institutions kept people safe. Now she suspected they sometimes protected the powerful instead. She started keeping a tiny recorder in her bag more for herself than for war. Memory bends under pressure. Facts help. Lena watched the device and tapped Ella's knuckle in solidarity. "Document everything," she said. "HR can be unpredictable. Trust the paper." The plan was small. Keep receipts of late emails, save timestamps, log every odd meeting. It felt covert and enormous. Each note felt like a small act of defiance. Donovan's tone sharpened one Thursday. He accused her of missing a date during a team meeting, though her file timestamps proved otherwise. Faces turned, her cheeks burned. After the meeting, he cornered her and lowered his voice. "You understand how fragile careers are," he said. "One misstep and doors close." His words were a threat dressed as guidance. Ella's recorder captured the quiet menace. For the first time, fear was audible. She reached out to Mara, a journalist known for exposing corporate scandals. Mara smelled of coffee and urgency and asked clear questions. "Do you have files? Names? Emails?" She didn't want anger. She wanted proof. Ella handed over the recording, the emails, and the dates she'd written in a notebook. Mara's face tightened. "We need more than one voice. Others must be willing to speak," she said. Exposure without corroboration risks being dismissed. The work had to be precise. They began the slow work of finding witnesses. Priya, who had left months before, answered in a voice edged with fatigue. "He told me I wasn't serious," Priya said. "He made me apologize for being ambitious." Another assistant shared an old snap of a message thread where a senior insisted on private feedback. Each story fit like tiles in a mosaic. With each call, Ella felt less like a lone target and more like an axis around which truth could turn. Donovan escalated when he sensed change. He made a show of mentoring her at town halls and praised her in front of peers, then leaned close with a private smile and a reminder of who controlled references. He invited her to an after-hours strategy session that felt like a test. When she hesitated, the compliments turned cold. "We all make choices," he said. "Choose wisely." The line between career and coercion thinned. Inside HR, Lena and a few allies who quietly believed in safety began to assemble archived files. They found an old complaint that had vanished from the usual channels, notes redacted, timestamps altered. Someone had made a record disappear. The discovery shifted their plan from tentative to urgent. If papers had been edited before, more could be. They had to move fast and smart. The mosaic had cracks that a predator used. Their job was to expose them. Ella stopped answering late-night comments that felt like invitations. She refused the solitary strategy sessions and suggested group meetings. Donovan's texts tightened, his compliments added weight. She stood firm. The morning Mara called marked the moment when private fear met public momentum. "We have enough to move," she said, voice even and sharp. "We cannot publish until the pattern is undeniable." Months of careful collecting lurched toward a single fall. Donovan strode into the office that day like a man trained to command rooms, but the newsroom hummed with a different rhythm, and it thrummed toward exposure. They coordinated. Priya agreed to speak on the record, hands steady. The assistant, who had saved a screenshot of an inappropriate message, consented to hand it over. A former intern who had been reassigned after complaining composed a note with dates and timestamps. Each voice layered over the recorder's hum. Each file added weight. Mara drafted questions and lined up legal protection. The reporter's confidence was a kind of armor for the women who had been taught to hide. Donovan watched the office like a chess master. He noticed Lena's absences and sent curt messages. He staged a meeting to showcase Ella's work in front of the board and praised her publicly to remind the room how favored she was. His smile was a blade. "She's one of the brightest," he said aloud to cameras. Then in private, his tone was coaxing and then cold. When rumors began to orbit, he tightened the company's image with statements about values and respect, words chosen to steer attention away from people. On a rain-sliced afternoon, Ella walked into his office and found him waiting with legal counsel. The city outside blurred. The office felt like an interrogation room. His lawyer sat like a silent alarm. "We want to help you," Donovan said, smooth as ever. "You must understand the consequences of false claims." He slid a thin envelope toward her like a peace offering. The implication hovered: accept a quiet settlement and preserve a career. Refuse, and the weight of litigation might crush what mattered. Ella left the envelope untouched. In the subway, she replayed the options: a palatable silence that would keep her mother's pride intact, or a storm that might topple an empire. Strangers scrolled their screens, unaware a private decision might change headlines. She called Lena and Mara. "I won't be bought," she said. "Not by fear, not by money." Mara scheduled a pre-publication meeting with counsel and the women's testimonies. The room smelled of coffee and old paper, an atmosphere of something ancient and necessary. The reporter walked through each snippet of evidence. The women added context, names, dates. Together they built an airtight narrative. "We go live at dawn," Mara said. "Get ready for backlash. Keep communication tight." When the article posted, the world straightened like a reed under wind. Social feeds exploded. Donovan's curated image fractured as allegations stacked like dominoes. The company issued a brief statement about allegations under review, language meant to buy time. Time moved faster than silence this time. Women in the company gathered around screens, hands over mouths, relief and terror braided. HR lines flooded. Legal teams pinged in a cold rhythm. Donovan's public answer was engineered. Denial, deflection, then a pledge to cooperate with an internal review. He delivered it with his brand voice, practiced and polished. The board, sensing risk, convened a closed session and placed him on paid leave pending investigation. Paid leave is the corporate equivalent of supervised freedom, distance with stigma. For some inside, it felt like a first win, but victory invited retaliation. Donovan's allies mobilized PR and legal teams to muddy waters. Anonymous messages appeared in employees' inboxes warning of instability and urging loyalty. Recruiters called some women with confidential offers designed to move them before depositions. Fear metastasized into strategy. The predator's network twitched, public pressure mounted. More women spoke up, names accumulated. Mara ran follow-ups with quotes and copies of redacted HR memos. The narrative changed from a single accusation to a map of culture, how systems had enabled abuse. Viewers dialed into town halls and watched executives sweat. Investors called. The board scrambled to show action under the harsh light. Legal teams on both sides prepared. Donovan hired top defense counsel accustomed to making scandals evaporate. The women secured representation through advocacy groups and pro bono attorneys who fought workplace abuse. Depositions were scheduled, subpoenas flew. In the sterile halls of the courthouse, the hum of evidence felt like a new voice. Formal, blunt, and harder to erase. Ella rode the waves of sorrow and small triumphs. Support messages folded into her inbox from strangers, and threats arrived in equal measure. Friends split into circles of belief and silence. Her mother watched interviews and asked in a voice thick with worry, "Are you sure?" Ella answered with a clarity she did not always feel. "I did what I had to do." The phrase steadied her. The company tried to humanize Donovan, morning show clips of charity, carefully timed testimonials. The tactic aimed to complicate the script. If he helped hospitals, how could he also harm employees? But survivors' voices cut through curated clips. Context mattered. When recordings were played in depositions, the charm lost its polish and sounded small, brittle, incriminating. The media cycle can be brutal and capricious. Some outlets chased sensation. Others sought accountability. The women learned to brace for both. They practiced statements, kept voices steady and true. They supported each other in waiting rooms and cried in bathrooms together. A quiet community formed out of shared shock and the need to prevent the cycle from repeating. Their solidarity made the narrative larger than one man. Outside the headquarters, protests sprang up, signs reading "Safety over silence" and "Power isn't immunity." Demonstrations were pressure and mirror, telling executives a business's value lies in people. New policies were promised, but employees demanded real change: independent audits, transparent complaint processes, trained investigators. Donovan countered with legal maneuvers, including a defamation suit designed to shift the conversation onto technicalities. It was a tactic to delay and exhaust. Yet subpoenas produced archived HR emails that painted a stubborn pattern. The balance began to tip. Ella found small rituals that kept her human: a cup of tea at dawn, a call with her mother, Lena dropping by with takeout and fierce looks. When law enforcement interviews began, it felt like the floor finally shifted toward accountability that could not be smoothed over by PR. She held on tightly. The courtroom felt ordinary until the tape played. Donovan's words, once a slick symphony of power, sounded brittle when looped. Witnesses sat and told a slow truth that unspooled years of small hurts. The judge listened. Reporters typed. For the first time, the scale of consequence weighed heavier than the scale of glamour. Outside, protests swelled and social feeds churned. The defense attempted to dismantle memories with cross-examinations, probing dates and motives. The women answered with steadiness learned in months of preparation. When the defense played clips of Donovan calling someone dedicated, the room reminded itself of context. Charm does not cancel harm. The judge instructed counsel to stick to facts over PR myths. Outside the courtroom, the company drafted new policies and issued press releases about strengthening culture. Language changed quickly. Practices changed slower. Employees demanded meaningful reform. Independent audits, external complaint lines, and trained impartial investigators. Lena worked with advocacy groups to draft policy templates to share with other firms. The work extended past one man into the scaffolding that allowed him to hide. More employees came forward. Some could not withstand pressure and withdrew. Others stayed, buoyed by solidarity. In waiting rooms, they shared coffees, memos, and sometimes laughter that felt like reclaiming lost normalcy. That collective courage made the story larger than a single perpetrator. When the jury returned, the verdict landed like a held breath released, guilty on multiple counts. The room exhaled in different ways: jubilation, relief, cautious sorrow for what had been lost. Donovan's micro-expressions flickered: shock, anger, then a posture of someone unable to command the script. He had misread a rule: power protects itself until evidence no longer allows it. In the months after, corporate structures shifted. New directors joined the board, independent oversight was created, and HR processes grew more transparent. A hotline linked to external mediators. Training moved from checkbox to conversation. Not every fix was perfect. Not every wound healed. But the company could no longer ignore that its reputation hinged on how it treated people. Ella took a role at a smaller firm committed to accountability. She used the skills she'd fought to protect. Lena left and launched a consultancy helping organizations build trustworthy processes. Priya returned to school and taught workplace ethics. They found different kinds of peace: quiet, loud, all earned. They spoke at panels, trained teams, and one by one changed the conversation within industries. The journey wasn't neat. Donovan appealed. Legal battles dragged some pieces of the narrative into slow fights over technicalities. Some allies retreated, exhausted by the grind. Yet the social shift remained. When new accusations surfaced elsewhere, people referenced this case as precedent. The ecosystem had changed. Secrecy found fewer places to hide. Years later, a young woman entered an office and saw a poster about respectful workplaces. She smiled in a way her mother had never had at 23. The world didn't perfect itself overnight, but change had meaning. Small policies, active witnesses, and survivors who spoke assembled new guardrails. If this story moved you, subscribe for more narratives that lift hidden truths. Leave a comment with what resonated, how you'd act under pressure, or resources your community needs. Hit like to amplify the message. Simple engagement matters because algorithms decide what reaches people next, and keeping the conversation alive helps prevent quiet crimes from repeating.